And welcome back to a fresh episode of the Business Growth Show. I'm your host, Sam Dunning, co-owner over at webchoiceuk.com. And if you haven't yet, check out our weekly email where we share actionable marketing tips, useful podcasts, free guides, bonus resources, and much, much more every Monday to start your week off with a bang. You can sign up over at businessgrowth.email. So joining me today, we've got Tim Clarke. Tim's a CEO and co-founder over at UNCrushed, which is a platform and community for mental health awareness. Very warm welcome to the show, Tim. How's it going?
Thank you. I'm good, thank you. It's always good to hear another British voice. I'm kind of sad you're not in the Superman outfit today.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. I was hoping I got away with that on LinkedIn a while back, and the last few people I've chatted to have been bringing it up. So I think the Superman outfit's going to have to make an appearance in a future podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're on LinkedIn, look out for SEO Man or on the YouTube, you'll see it lounging about and have a good laugh. But yeah, looking forward to today, Tim. We're going to be chatting all around prioritizing mental health and how it impacts sales performance. So first and foremost, a very open-ended question to kick off the convo. How does mental health really correlate? How does it relate to sales?
Yeah, well, last year in 2021, UNCrushed, Sales Health Alliance with Jeff Risley and Richard Harris, we partnered up and we ran a survey on the state of mental health in sales. We surveyed about 700 people. And from the respondents, 3 in 5 said that they were struggling with their mental health.
Wow. Okay.
And through this report, and we'll talk about where to get it later on, it's all free. There's a clear correlation, not a big surprise, clear correlation between if you have good mental health, you're doing better at sales. We found that salespeople with the best mental health were 3 times more likely to rate their sales performance as very good or excellent compared to those with poor mental health. I think this has been a challenge for a long period of time. Sales is one of the oldest professions and one of the most challenging professions. And with that comes sometimes some challenges. And there's obviously stigma associated with saying mental illness. So when we're talking about this, it could be anything from burnout, anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome, through to some of the more darker ones as well.
Yeah. I mean, that in itself, 3 out of 5, seems like a staggering number. I would have never thought myself that it would have been that high a percentage of people that struggle with it. So that alone shows that it's an issue and something that I guess needs to be brought up and discussed a lot more than it is right now. So perhaps we should start with some of the main reasons why this is something that so many of us struggle with, especially in the sales frontier.
Yeah, I mean, from my own personal perspective, so I'm currently in marketing. I spent the last 8 or so years in marketing, and before that, I spent 7 years in sales. Vodafone, Ricoh, Salesforce, and so I always like to consider myself a marketer with a passion for sales. And I know for me, growing up in England, working in England, like it was this stiff upper lip mentality. Don't speak about feelings, emotions. Just say yes, do everything, be strong, particularly as a male. Just don't process emotions. And so one thing that's really telling for me is that we even had 700 people responding to this survey. The fact that people are willing now, particularly after the pandemic, to come forwards and speak about this, I think it's very telling that salespeople want change. And that change not only starts from within, but it also starts within their leadership and within their companies.
Yeah. Definitely. I think, like you say, it's something that's not talked about enough. So hopefully we're going to share some ideas really around if anyone tuning in has had issues or feels like they could be struggling. We can give them some ideas and some best practices that work for yourself, Tim, and perhaps people that you've helped. So are there any signs that we should look out for when it comes to our own mental health? Perhaps we're a sales rep, perhaps we're not, perhaps we run a business, which can be very stressful in itself, or perhaps we're a marketer that juggles many, many things. And we feel that ultimately it's having an impact on our performance, whether that is our sales, our bottom line, our revenue. I guess initially, are there any things that we should be looking out for? Any signs?
Yeah, I mean, irrespective of the role, life is always going to happen on life's terms. And I'm a big believer it's about how we can face those challenges that come through life. And that word facing is pretty key, because for me, I didn't have a lot of the tools on how to face it, so I just ran from it. I tried to ignore it and suppress it. And I share that back in 2013, I lost my dad suddenly. He passed away of a stroke, and I continued working the rest of the day. And then the following day, and I only learned this a few months later on, like I was on the phone with my BDRs, and discussing sales opportunities for them. It was really weird. They're like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Like, you've just gone through this big life event. And so that was my first way of processing it or dealing with it, was to avoid it.
Right.
And so I think avoidance can come in many forms. It could be through work, could be through social media, could be through drugs, through alcohol. And so there's no harm in avoidance, depending on what the choice is.
Mm.
So I think to answer your question, one of the first things is just recognizing, like, is there a particularly hard emotion that I'm facing right now, and how am I choosing to face that or turn away from it? And just having that period of reflection. Like, sometimes, particularly in sales, we're moving so fast, and you don't see it until it's too late. And this is where burnout really fits in as well. Like, people grind and grind and grind, and there's all these hustle posts, and thankfully there's lots of anti-hustle posts on LinkedIn now. But in my opinion, like, obviously everyone can choose how they want to work, and kudos to them. For me, it didn't work, or it did for a period of time, and then I burnt out. It's too much. I didn't have any space.
Yeah. I think with sales as well, and if you run your business, or if you're an entrepreneur, perhaps a small business owner, the thing is, you've always got targets above your head, right? So, and I've certainly been guilty of this in the past, like prioritizing, trying to hit a number, or trying to get enough leads in the pipeline, and then trying to bring them over to closure to hit a target, that I kind of forget everything else that's going on around me and just focus on that so hard. And then it's not really helping, because you're putting yourself under so much stress. You're perhaps having an impact on the rest of your family, maybe your friends, or whoever's close to you, maybe the rest other people that you're working with, that ultimately, from a long-term perspective, hitting that target for that month doesn't really matter on the impact it's had on yourself. So yeah, obviously mine's a very minor incident compared to yours, Tim, but certainly can see where you're coming from on that. So, in terms of, are there any leading factors? I guess it varies quite a lot, that actually tend to cause poor mental health, and from the sales front, is it usually a kind of something massive that impacted your life, like in your case, or is it we're perhaps putting too much stress on ourselves to hit numbers? Or are there any I guess common things that we should be aware of that can impact us, and that we should kind of take note of?
Yeah, it's a great question. In therapy, they talk about big T's and little T's, big trauma and little trauma, and so yeah, maybe people relate, or they've lost someone, or there's been an accident, something big in their life. But the reason I say it's a great question is because it absolutely doesn't have to be the case. It could be lots of little things as well. Like putting aside the loss, like just the pressure of, like, be the best at school, getting through being bullied, work your way up and get as high as possible in the company, earn as much money, hit it. All these little things, like, they can really build on you. And I love the analogy of, like, is your glass empty, or is your glass full? And
Yep.
a lot of the time, like, these things take away from your glass. And so I asked, like, what are you doing to refill it? And I remember when I had the money, the material things, like all the great stuff, I wasn't fulfilled whatsoever. I had no happiness whatsoever. And then that led me to a journey to go, what's my why? What does fill me up? And I realized, like, I don't want work to define me. My personality, or my personal identity, and my work identity was completely intertwined. And that, again, I think that helped me for a long period in starting my career and moving up. So not putting it down, but long term, like, I'm more than my job.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah, I mean, burnout's probably one that hits a lot of sales professionals, especially small business owners and probably larger business owners too. Perhaps, and feel free to share your own experiences, Tim. What are some ways that you've found if you do feel like everything's getting too much, if you feel like you're working all these long hours, if you feel like everything's getting on top of you, are there any ways that we can, I guess, shift the burden, and any practices that you recommend to help people that are feeling that way?
Yeah, so there's a few things. I think one, just looking at what can you do for yourself. And for me, I think the biggest thing is boundaries. Putting
Right.
in place, particularly now, like a lot of people are working from home.
Hmm.
Perhaps you have kids at home. Perhaps you're caring for elderly or other loved ones in your family. And so Zoom can just kind of blend into the rest of your day.
Yep.
I know for me personally, like a lot of the time I wasn't getting out of the house. And I just worked all the time. And so the first kind of tip is take a step back, figure out like what's your start time, what's your end time. Maybe it's not as rigid as that. Like you might have blocks of time. Maybe you want to go work out for a period of time. Maybe you want to go take a walk with the dog. But physical movement is great. And I also just love to shift my energy. And I it sounds a little woo woo, but I've now been to a Tony Robbins conference, and he talks about before getting on a call or before on a video call, just stand up, jump around, move your body, like just shift some of your energy, because it's really this correlation between what's going on in your head and in your body, and your body retains that. So I think that's within the individual.
Yep.
Certainly if someone's struggling, highly encourage them to reach out for help.
Okay.
And even that sounds serious to me as I say it. So let's just make it a little easier. If you have something going on in your head, like I'm angry, I'm resentful, oh, this is stressful, oh, I'm feeling so much pressure, just talk to someone about it. And I love this saying that when you share something, you divide the pain and you multiply the joy. It just really halves these challenges when you share it. And I think we all need connection. So that's the individual. The second thing is then building on that, speaking to someone, is looking at what's your relationship like with your manager. And I think for any managers listening, like hopefully you are creating an environment where people can come forwards and can come speak to you. And I appreciate that it is challenging. Now I'm the marketer and I'm like, oh, it's prioritize mental health over sales. I appreciate that you have to hit quotas and you have to deliver revenue performance. However, there's still a way to do it in terms of treating someone as a human and not just a number. And there's some great people out there that really talk about this, like Ian Cognac, for example. He focuses a lot on, you're more than your number. So as a manager, you creating an environment for your employees to come forward to speak to you, perhaps outside of work stuff. It doesn't mean you have to deal with therapy stuff, like hardcore issues, but just saying, hey, I'm not okay today, or maybe I need some support.
Yeah. Yeah, all great points. I mean, the routine one, first of all, kind of breaking up your day. I mean, I've done that. I'm sure many people tuning in have done that, where you've just jam-packed your day with calls, Zoom sessions. Perhaps you're building proposals, perhaps you're doing follow-ups, perhaps you're doing other bits and pieces with your team. And then before you know it, you've missed your workout, you've missed your walk, you've missed lunch, you've missed everything else. And you think, where the heck's the day gone? You feel drained, and then you realize you've still got more stuff to do and plan for the next day. So yeah, breaking up those, kind of getting those breaks in, getting some movement, making sure you're hydrated, getting enough food, and all those good points are so important. So I don't know about you, I find if I'm staring at a screen for too long, I start to get frustrated, and I don't even realize it until I move away, until I get outside. Then I realize, cool, that everything doesn't seem as bad as it was. Now I've kind of walked about, had a workout or had a run or whatever it is for 5-10 minutes. My mind just feels so much fresher, and I feel less worked up and frustrated.
Yeah, physical exercise has been one that I've avoided for a long period of time. I've done a lot on my own mental health. And then recently, I just changed jobs and I decided to take a month off in between those two jobs, which I appreciate is a big privilege to be able to do that. The way that I used that time off was to build a new routine, which incorporated the physical exercise. And so now that I was doing it for 3-4 weeks, and I'm in week 1 of my new role now, like I've been consistently getting up and getting some form of movement. My Peloton is finally getting used after goodness knows how many years. But yeah, it was interesting for me. Like I felt this resistance and procrastinating about like, oh, I don't want to get on the bike. There's so much effort. But then as I started to build that routine, now it's like I want to do it. And then using technology to support, like I have an Apple Watch. There's lots of other great technology that's out there. And I got accountability and connection with others, just to kind of motivate me throughout the day. But the other thing with Zoom is it's very fatiguing to have your video on and your audio on all the day.
Yep.
And so again, like another tip would be for managers, like take a walking call or use a phone instead of a laptop. So many different options that are available to you.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's almost become habit that every call has to be a Zoom session. And it's like, well, if you don't need to see this person on camera, like you say, why not go for a walk? Just put it on your mobile, your cell phone instead. And that way it breaks it up a bit, and it means you don't have to sit down and get that movement in. So that makes perfect sense. And shifting on to the second point, if you're perhaps in a leadership position, perhaps you manage a team, maybe you've got a team of sales reps, you're talking about kind of creating an open environment where people can come forward if they feel like they've got issues, if they're struggling with something. Is that easier said than done, Tim? Have you got any other examples of perhaps people that you've worked with, or any success stories where this has worked well, perhaps for leadership positions where they've kind of really seen a change in their team, or perhaps they've had examples where people have been struggling and they've really kind of helped get them on the right track?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the questions we asked in the survey was reflect on the time in your sales career when you felt most engaged and motivated. And the top 3 factors were you felt supported by your leader or manager, you felt recognized and valued by your company, and you felt like you had autonomy and free will in your role. And all of these things, I think, tie back into the culture of the company, the leadership style. One of my favorite books to recommend in this area is Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. And she really emphasizes the importance of leading with vulnerability. There's a ton of research around this. Ginger, I think Headspace acquired Ginger, and they've got a lot of research on the impact of leaders leading with vulnerability. However, they're also concerned that it will impact how people think of them. And so first of all, it's a personal choice for someone. Like, okay, maybe you don't want to share the in-depths of everything that's going on in your marriage or, something in your life. However, like as you mentioned, entrepreneur, like perhaps you're working in a startup, like maybe just sharing that I recognize this is a really challenging time right now. Like sometimes I feel burnt out in the evening, and this is what I do to take care of myself. And it just normalizes some of these conversations. Now, thankfully, like a lot of companies, they offer employee assistance programs. And so if it's someone that is struggling, that needs some sort of professional support, the key role for the leader is to connect people with that employee assistance program, to connect them with that support. However, like in the US for Mental Health America, 60% of the people that say they have a challenge with mental illness don't reach out for help. And so I think there's a massive focus before someone asks to go to the EAP. Like they need to speak to the manager and maybe it might just be asking them how they are, not once, but twice. The instantaneous response when I go, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. And actually, how do we go a level deeper than that? And so sometimes I like to say like, hey, look at a traffic light system. Maybe just check in with your team where you are at red, orange, green, and just gauge where the team is at. And to specifically answer your question, I've had some amazing leaders at Salesforce over the years that have really helped me, and I felt seen, I felt heard. And they also have some amazing employee resource groups as well for people to connect with each other. I think all of this, like the common theme is connection and support.
Yeah. And do you think that if people are in a leadership role and they are managing some kind of team, do you think they should be open with the team as well to perhaps encourage them to open up a bit more? And perhaps if they are struggling to, whether that is saying, look, this is something that I struggled with a while ago. And so if if you are having issues, if you are feeling under pressure with your sales targets, or if you're finding work hard, if everything's getting on top of you, then feel free to kind of chat to myself or someone we've designated in the team. And because I know I've struggled with this as well. So is it more about them being open, or is that perhaps not the way to look at it?
I think it is, with a caveat, which I'll touch on. So I think vulnerability breeds vulnerability. You need to create a space for people to be vulnerable, and if you don't connect on that level, like hopefully they'll connect with someone else in the team. But between two people, you need to set the scene of vulnerability. The caveat is that I appreciate that me being a white male is one thing to share my story. And then when we look at other genders, other races, there are multiple levels of stigma associated with mental health. And so I appreciate that it's not going to be a one size fits all, because the risk of discrimination is extremely real. I also think there's a generational shift as well. I think for some like the millennials, Gen Z, I think people are more willing to speak openly about their mental health, and I think they want to as well. Within, we've seen right now with the Great Resignation, so many people are changing jobs, particularly in sales. I've changed jobs. I think a lot of people want to work for a company that has this leadership style that we're talking about, that also has a culture of being able to bring your full authentic self to work. Not having to be like, well, this is the work Tim, and everything else just kind of I keep behind the curtain.
Yeah. It's that those points all make sense now. With that said, we touched on this a bit earlier, but in terms of sales targets, to grow a business, we all need to set sales targets. We all have revenue goals, and if we fail to hit them, there's going to be some kind of knock-on effect. Whether that's as a sales rep, it's going to affect your commission. Whether that's as a manager or a business owner, it's going to affect the growth of your company. How do we empower our team to say, look, we've got this number to hit and we need to do X, Y, Z to make it happen, but at the same time, not stress them out so much that they think their life depends on it? Is there a balance that we need to consider? Have you any recommendations to how to get that?
Yeah, I think that there's one mentality that in order to, increase the amount of leads, you do more outreach and, close more deals. Like, how do you hit your numbers? You just do more work. And actually, there's this other mentality of saying, well, wait a minute. If people on your team are feeling healthy, they're feeling refreshed, they're feeling energized, they're actually going to do a better job. I don't think more will equal better. And so I think to answer your question, like there's an opportunity here, like go do a team building exercise. I know, again, it's easy for me to say in marketing, but even just taking like an hour out, do it on Zoom, like do something to just go back to those things that help salespeople feel most engaged and motivated. They feel supported, they feel recognized, they feel valued, they have autonomy and free will. Like go value your team, go do something fun with them. And I think that will just charge them up. And John Barrows put out this video a couple of days ago about actually giving a shit. And he was talking about how one of his team's numbers, fell flat at a certain point. And he was emphasizing, you need to give a shit. You need to really, really care. And I think if you're exhausted and burnt out, you're not going to care.
Yeah. So I guess it's keeping your team, like you said, energized, motivated, and keep them happy, and not always doing work. And like you say, if you can get the chance to do these team building exercises, get them out of the office, get them doing some fun stuff together. Like you said, I suppose they come back refreshed.
Yeah, even like one thing I love that we've done with the team is, particularly during the peak of the pandemic, we put together this slide deck, and each team meeting would be like, everyone would have a slide in a minute to say one thing that they did last week. And it could be a photo of their kids. It could be something that they've watched on TV. Maybe they cook something. And again, it brings people together. You get this connection with each other. And I think this connection, like perhaps you're a new BDR, and I know there's some great technology with like Gong and Chorus, how you can start to listen to some of these other sales tools and obviously different cadences and outreaches that are available. But you still need connection, like with your teammates. I know when I was in sales, it was like little black book. You don't share anything. It's just kind of pre having a CRM in place, and kind of a lone wolf. Maybe if you're lucky, you get a ride along. Now, like, I think you want to connect with your teammates.
Yeah, of course you do. Especially as most of us now are working from home. We're perhaps stuck in the same office for 8 hours, perhaps longer a day. So those little things that can break it up as and when you can, are always nice.
And the amount of people that have joined new companies, whether particularly in the frontline sales roles, like so many people have changed. And I know for me, like a couple of years ago, when I moved over to San Francisco from London, and I got to go into the Salesforce offices for the first time. Like, I felt so connected to Salesforce US offices. I felt so connected to the company, to the culture, and I've connected with a few friends who have started at Salesforce over the last couple of years who haven't been to an office, and like, people just don't feel as connected with their brand and their company unless you do something about it. And I think that's another thing that managers need to be proactive about now. I remember we did some CRO roundtables last year, and they were talking about one of the biggest challenges they're facing is around talent. Even where they got to the point where talent would accept jobs and then they wouldn't turn up for those jobs because they got a better offer elsewhere.
Right.
I think you need to create a culture that goes way beyond the numbers.
On that point, if you're perhaps looking for a new opportunity and you're interviewing for a few companies, are there any things that you recommend that we should look out for, Tim, to, I guess, make sure the culture's going to be a good fit, to make sure they're actually going to openly support mental health? There's going to be a community there. So if we do have problems, they're going to help us. It's not just going to be join the company, slammed hard on us day one, and we're working our ass off to hit our number. Are there any things that we should look out for from an organization we're perhaps looking to join?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, with companies like RepView and Glassdoor, there's so many great technologies that are out there now that you can get some insights. I think number one is looking at what benefits are available. So this is kind of the, what's on paper. Do they have good benefits to support me? And the thing I would look out for there is, are they specifically calling out mental health benefits as opposed to, particularly in the US, just health insurance and some of the more standard offerings.
Yep.
Number two, I think within the interview process is understanding, again, depending on the interview process, perhaps you're meeting some of your peers, perhaps you're interviewing with the hiring manager who would be your manager, kind of guessing out for them, like, what is your leadership style? How happy are people on your team? On a side note, one of the great questions is always asked to ask about attainment. How many people are actually hitting quota or have hit quota? I think it's a big red flag if they don't answer that question. And then the final thing is just understanding, like, what's the work environment, and this is the hardest one to kind of assess. But seeing if through your LinkedIn connections, that your primary network, your secondary network, like, do you have other people that work there already? And can give you a feel, like, are people always logged on to Slack or whatever messaging platform until 10 p.m. at night? Or are people actually working manageable hours? And again, I recognize as I say that, I hear the sales voice in my head are like, well, look, sometimes you got to work late hours. Like, I get it, like with the RFPs and you're coming towards the end of the quarter, like 100%. But is it a constant? Like, are people really just being pressured constantly? And again, just to say, like, some people thrive in that. I thrived in that environment for a long period of time, and I definitely credit it with, like, where I've got to in my career. However, I now know after going through certain life events, it's not feasible for me to continue that. And so, you know what? If you think if it's a great financial move for you, if you think you're going to hit target and it's really going to help boost your career, maybe you're going for an AE role or a senior AE role or want to get into sales management, like, go for it. But just be very clear with what you're buying into.
Yeah, I suppose it's about asking the tough questions, especially in the interview process, so you can really understand, look, what's quota up, how many people are hitting it, and walk me through what a day working in this role is. Asking those tricky ones that you might be a little bit apprehensive to ask, and then that's a good point about speaking to people in your network, whether that's on LinkedIn or other channels. So you can actually say, look, what's this actually like working for this company? Can you share insights into what you're doing? How difficult is quota? How are they providing you with leads, or is it all outbound, or whatever's relevant to the role you're going after? Some really good points. So we've talked a lot about sales and leadership. What about flipping it to marketing? Are there any I guess anything we should look out for as a marketer, perhaps, which is a little bit less talked about in terms of things that could be really stressing us out, really impacting our mental health? Any things we should be aware of, and perhaps we can chat about how to combat those too.
Yeah, well, thankfully, Salesforce has extremely high standards when it comes to creative, to brand, to product marketing, like across the board. And a story I'll share is that when we created UNCrushed, I tried to bring those very high standards into the company, and that didn't work. Namely because we weren't paying people. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, like volunteering. And so I think that saying of perfection is the enemy of good. And so recognizing, like, as a marketer, I had such high standards that sometimes it's okay not to have something perfect and get it out there. And I found with the team at UNCrushed, like, that mentality was then being pushed onto other people, and that wasn't good for their mental health. So I share this not only as like an IC, but also as a leader. Really just think about, okay, is this really required? And I appreciate, like, so that's an example, obviously, in the nonprofit world, different when you are paying people. But let's look at things like project launches or product launches. When you're getting something to market, are the timelines feasible? And sometimes there's something that's just unavoidable. You need to get it out to market. Maybe it's a partnership or a new feature release. But sometimes just taking a step back and asking some of the teams that you're collaborating with, like, is this needed? And I think some of the biggest partners to marketing, you've got product, you've got sales, you've got customer success. Like, sometimes there could be a lot of pressure, and I think one of the biggest skills is to learn how to prioritize and how to learn how to say no sometimes.
I was going to say, if you're a marketer, probably the biggest headache, the biggest stress, the biggest cause of high blood pressure is sales saying we don't have enough leads. Give us some more leads, dang nabbit. And then you've got that stress to deal with.
Yeah.
And
how about for you though? Like, I assume sometimes you have clients that come forward and they want instantaneous results.
All the time. Yeah. Those are common requests, especially in our game. So a lot of what we provide is search engine optimization, which tends to be a long-term process of getting websites to organic page one of Google. And when prospects are coming to us saying, look, we need it in a week or we need it in a month, we're very upfront in the fact that that's not going to happen. So I suppose it's managing expectations, which isn't so bad on my side as a agency co-owner. But I suppose if you're because I'm long in the tooth, I've been doing it many years, so I've learned what's going to cause me stress and how to manage customers and all that good stuff. I suppose it's being aware, and also if you're not necessarily in an agency, if you're in an internal outfit as a marketer, you might not have that privilege.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a skill to, like you said, like you developed, and through experience. And so, particularly for any new marketers that are starting here, and I know now marketing, you can come from many different backgrounds, like in sales, in customer success, in product, etc. And so, just listening to your words there, like it's a big skill to develop and not to put that pressure on yourself.
Yeah. Certainly, I guess from a marketing front, learning to not always. And it's going to be difficult if you're in a more junior role, but not always accepting or perhaps discussing things a bit more. So if sales or leadership do say, look, we need X amount of leads or we need this launch by this date without fail, then having a conversation and saying if it's going to be realistic or not, as there's no point in putting unneeded deadlines or stress on your head if the target is way out the window. And having a discussion around it and setting some sensible expectations so everyone's on the same page. You're not stressing out, sales aren't chasing you, leadership's okay, and making sure everyone's kind of cooling down and being reasonable, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff, Tim. Look, really enjoyed the conversation today.
Yeah,
Thanks very
thank you.
much. It's been been really useful and shared some great insights around how we can keep our mental health in shape. So with that said, please do tell us more about how everyone tuning in can learn more about yourself, more about Uncrushed, and the best way to get in touch.
Yeah, so they can follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest platform to message me on. Particularly if anyone's struggling, feel free to just share that with me if you feel comfortable, and if you want me to connect you with someone, I'm happy to do that. And then from an Uncrushed point of view, you can go to uncrushed.org. All of our content resources are available free of charge. We've got the State of Mental Health in Sales survey that we did with Jeff Risley and Richard Harris available on the website. So check it out, and please let us know. You can also follow us on all the primary channels like Uncrushed on LinkedIn if you want to engage with us.
Nice one. Excellent stuff, Tim. So we'll put all of those links over in the show notes over at businessgrowth.marketing. And with that, I want to thank you once again for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much.
No worries. And as always, if you did enjoy today's episode, why not leave us a quick rating or subscribe for actionable marketing and business tips each and every week. And with that, we should catch you on the next one. Cheers.